afternoon, everyone. Quite happy to follow Sunila because I think she did a lot of work and wonderful work explaining how design can sort of impact change, how our brain sort of responds to visual graphics, and what effect that can have for brands. So she's done quite a lot of work for me already, which is great because now I can take off from there. My description says independent design consultant, which is quite vague. So I'll tell you what I do. I've been working in the branding sector for over 15 years. This is some of the work that I worked at indiaeconomichub in Bangalore. Designing sort of brands from all different scales to look at every single touch point in a holistic way, where identities are not treated just as a logo design plus collateral, but really sort of translating a larger vision and strategy through graphics. I even worked a lot in the packaging sector, which I used to find perhaps was one of my most passionate things, just as Sunila pointed out, for all those very reasons. I also work independently as a lettering artist, where letters sort of become like a muse of sorts, like a subject, where they become an art piece. And more functionally, I design fonts. I design both in English, which is the Latin script, as well as Bengali. Some of these fonts are available on Google. If anyone has an iPhone, it will be on that as well. Whoops, I feel like okay, sorry. But let's get to the topic of today, which is multilingual type. I'm multilingual. I speak Hindi, English, and Konkani. The average Indian is also multilingual, and they can speak at least 2 or 3, if not more, languages. In the past, businesses would sort of reflect this multilingual diversity, and you'd see it where they would show the name of the shop sign or an advertising in 2 or more scripts. This is a building I love, which is actually in Bangalore near Alsur. And what I like about this particularly is that you see the name of the building in English, Bengali, and Kannada in the same language, in the same synergy. There is no disconnect. So you can see any part of the building and you'll know which one it is. You see it in packaging as well in the past. One of my favorite ones is Wibs. And of course, the very familiar Isab Gold packaging, which this two-sided pack so beautifully, very, very cleverly designed what could have been quite a mammoth task to design the identical sort of visual graphics across 2 scripts. But somewhere we saw a shift, maybe over 2 decades ago, with the influx of global brands coming in. It seemed like there was a preference towards the English identity. Maybe it was to build aspiration, to also perhaps look westernized. And there are lots of challenges, and I can see why this may have gone sort of down this path. But when I looked at Dubai, when I traveled there, which also has a lot of influx of international brands, and over there, all the brands sort of adapted to the local script, not in an apologetic way, but with as much love, as much attention to detail as the master brand. Even in Thailand, I would love to go to supermarkets. And, sorry, I have a bad throat. I'm just going to take a water break. Excuse me. Right. So even in Thailand, I would love to go to the supermarkets and try and identify the packaging, even though the script was alien to me. If anyone knows, I'm sure everyone can guess what this is, right? No brainer. This sort of, this beautiful coexistence of global and local was extremely interesting. How is it harmonized so well, almost seamlessly? But it made me really stop and wonder, why don't we see enough of this in India anymore? Have we become apologetic of our native languages? How can we cater to this multilingual diversity that we have? And what role and responsibility do we have in all of this? Let's take a step back and try and understand how design can impact culture and society. There's this wonderful quote by the comedian Trevor Noah, who I think is a scary name to say now in Bangalore, but I've been following for a while. He's a comedian, he's a polyglot, and he talks about how every time he speaks to someone in order to connect with them, he speaks to them in their language, or their accent, or their intonation. And this quote is quite powerful, which says language brings with it an identity and a culture, or at least the perception of it. A shared language says we are the same. A language barrier says we are different. And what is typography? All it is what language looks like. It's just a visual language. So when the language is again disconnected, that will send a message. When it's connected, it will send a different message. In India, we have 1,369 rationalized mother tongues, 121 languages, 22 official languages, and 15 recognized scripts. So, sort of creating design that embraces more than one script is perhaps one step towards preserving this rich and very varied linguistic diversity. But what is in it for brands? Right? Why should they do it? The answer is very simple. Inclusivity. I mean, I think we all would agree that the success of a brand can be directly related to its emotional, cultural, and social connect that it has with its audience. The stronger connection, the more likely the brand is going to be successful. But what could really set a brand apart is if it adopts a multilingual approach that is sensitive to local culture. And what I mean by that is when it sort of adapts its identity, it maintains the essence of the brand, but also the individuality of that regional script. So with this sort of interplay, or this connection through multilingual type, the consumer will build a stronger connection to the brand and in turn sort of bring that success into the brand as well. I'll take an example. This is an old example, but it really helps illustrate the point. This is Pizza Hut in Bombay. This one is in Chennai. And both the signs are very well crafted, well executed. But if you look at the Devanagari sign, it sort of reflects the same food-like qualities of the Pizza Hut brand. So whether it's the casual graffiti letters, you know, the sort of up and down, almost not level letters, it seems to capture that. But what about the Tamil sign? It doesn't. It's stiff, it's upright. Is it even connected? Doesn't feel like it. Another example, McDonald's and Domino's. Interestingly, both McDonald's and Domino's have very similar typography in their English logo. But look at where the Devanagari one has. So the main typography is crisp, bold, rounded, and you know, the McDonald's in Devanagari does that. What about here? Domino's seems like they're not interested. And I was actually quite shocked with this one because they just recently went through a global rebranding exercise, changed all the facades. Wouldn't that have been a great opportunity? So how can design do all this? Well, by creating a brandscape that's multilingual in nature, you can sort of build this association with your clients, you can build stronger connections, increase accessibility of information, and include more people. But of course, if it was so easy, why wouldn't we see it? So there are lots of challenges, and I'm going to discuss some of the larger ones that I've experienced or even get, asked back, which always forced me to think again. First one, unlike Dubai and Bangkok, India has more than just one local script. So how do we do this? We don't have to look too far to find the answer. We have the solution in the way our information has been displayed to us for many, many years. So whether it is a bilingual approach in your signage, information displays, wayfinding graphics, Or you'll see a trilingual approach, which takes not just the two official languages, which are Hindi and English, but also the regional script. Another issue that comes up is that there just isn't enough space. How do we put that many languages on a sign? I'm going to address this one a little later because maybe it requires a slightly creative solution to it. And another one that I get quite often from both designers and clients is that the graphic designers are not necessarily equipped to do this kind of work. Even though they may be well versed with more scripts, they may not be used to designing in multiple scripts. And here, in the morning also, I heard this word collaboration. It's like you really can't do much on your own. And I think that's a good way to start, right? If you wanted to shoot something, we'd get a photographer. If we wanted to write something, we'd get a writer. We don't expect ourselves to do everything. And that should be the case for work like this as well. So you can hire, say, typographers, lettering artists, or type designers who are quite capable of doing this task without too much ado. So let's look at some examples of this work. Some of this work, the branding pieces that I'll be showing you are work that I have done while I was at Keshavan Brand Union. And some of it is also with colleagues at Brand Union. So we start with food. I think everyone knows Paradise from Hyderabad, no need for introductions. About a decade ago, they wanted to launch a flagship restaurant in Indranagar, and they wanted to sort of reinvent their identity. It was very well established, but this identity was also designed eons ago, and they wanted to bring it into the contemporary times. So we retained that essence. We kept, the big P monogram and the words, and the word paradise, but we gave a twist to it by giving it some sort of fluidity, also looking at this mix of serif, if you see those lines on top, and sans serif, a combination of crisp and soft, which would take you back to the original brand, but also be very relevant to the food industry. When we were designing the Kannada logo, however, this was back in 2014, I think. This was the closest available font, which didn't seem to do the work that we were trying to do with the master brand. So we decided to redesign it. And that's what it looks like now. And to take you through a little bit of detail of what this is like, we look at the letters. The second two, I think a lot of people will be able to read Kannada over here. And you have a lot of these knots, curves that end in knots, but you can take it out and it still be legible. So we decided to do that to sort of bring that connect with the original letters. We added the same fluidity that we wanted to bring to give sort of food-like cues. And this mixture of serif and sans serif on top, we pondered over this one for a while. Because in English, serifs have a very specific purpose. They're not alien to the script. But if I were to add a serif in Kannada, it would seem like some sort of outside idea that is not really relevant to Kannada at all. We got lucky here, however, because Kannada has horizontal bars on top, and we said, let this one be. Now, I left one question unanswered, which was, what do you do when there's no space? Same problem here. We had no space to put the Kannada sign on the main sort of signage, but we figured out another place on the facade. By strategically placing it right on top of the signage, we made sure it would not go unnoticed. And even if you walked by, you could see it quite clearly. Now, packaging is another ball game. I'm sure everyone would be aware here that the distribution, the manufacture and distribution doesn't always align with the regional divisions and linguistic divisions. So it would be a rather expensive affair to always have, sort of a packaging change languages all the time. But with AVT Gold Cup, we were fortunate enough that because the distribution area was much smaller, the audience was much smaller, we were able to design, much like my dream of that ISOP Gold pack, to design the same graphics across 2 scripts. I'm going to move a little faster because With the financial services, it's the same thing. We sort of worked on quite a few banks. And you also have a mandate that the regional language has to be with the same weightage as the English or even more. But I think where we went a step further with HDFC Life was where we looked at even the tagline, where not just the words but also the visual language translated across scripts. And then of course there's the standard international company coming to India, wanting to adapt its identity, and this is what we did for Marks and Spencer. Now in this case, if you see all the stuff that I've been talking about, the design is always designed first in English or Latin, and then it's adapted to the regional scripts. So this really started making me wonder, is there a way that no script gets preference? Is there a possibility to sort of bridge that connection across scripts even more? I was fortunate enough to work with aesthetically, which is a type foundry based in Bombay, and who shared the same vision. Supremely talented people, already doing great work in the multilingual space. They were already designing Indian fonts. But when we started talking, they had a very clear vision that they wanted to design a font across multiple scripts. A single style that would, across multiple scripts, which could serve as an ingredient for designers to use. They don't always have to design type themselves. And thus was born Balu, which was the style that we settled on, which we designed across 10 scripts. I co-designed the Bengali font along with Nupur Date, who's also the founder of aesthetically. And after a lot of debates and deliberation, we settled on this style, which is this, again, very warm, very friendly, very playful letters. And we also designed it in various different ways. So what you saw was the bold, right down to a much lighter weight to ensure it's functional. And I'm happy to say that because this font is also, we sold it to Google, and Google has made it open source. So you see this, not surprisingly, most restaurants across, you'll see this typeface being used very unexpectedly in news channels. I still find it strange when this is used to announce a disaster. You know, it seems like such a friendly type. But that's the thing with the font, you don't know when what legs it's going to have. After we designed this, it was nice to see it all over. But every creative person is constantly thinking, what's next, now what? And we thought, okay, we've tasted this, multi-script family sort of approach. We love it. So let's do that again. Let's design another family with 10 scripts, but let's make it a little more robust this time. So we said, usually weights are referred to as regular or bold. Let's go very thin. And let's go extra bold, so then it'll have much wider usage. Also, if anyone is in the publishing sector over here, even packaging design, you know that quite often different widths can help you add a lot more information. So we said, let's look at creating extremely narrow to extremely wide. And then, of course, it's keeping up with the technology, where you have interfaces changing constantly. So you move from a laptop, a horizontal landscape to a vertical one. And the screen proportions are so variable that we said, let's make the typeface variable. So you have all the things that I said earlier. This is not playing. Oh.
It's playing behind you, it was playing. So.
Was it?
Yeah, just was.
Ah, yes. Okay. So as you see, you get all those extremes that I pointed out and all the sort of letter forms in between. Again, on this project, I worked on the Bengali script solely. In fact, I was a team of 12 designers. These are all their names because it's really not a one-man show. Each designer became an advocate for their script. 10 of us, so 10 scripts, and 2, Girish and Nupur, spearheaded the project. We had, again, a lot of discussions on what we wanted the style to look like. We wanted it to be influenced by Indian street lettering. And that's why you will see these very simplified structures. Now these are completely different scripts with completely different shapes and logic. But to find the common ground, to make it sort of a unified family was quite a task. So if you see here, it has these sharp terminals, pointed structures, angle joineries, and so on. We looked at common elements that when translated across all the scripts, like the circular form, to see how similar we wanted to make it, and in some cases how different we wanted to make it. So there's Devanagari, Gujarati, and Gurmukhi, with seemingly the same matras but treated completely differently. And this is what I want to refer to when I talk about authenticity of the script, or each script having its own individuality. And when it comes together, you see this entire sort of, like I said, 10 scripts across very different visual extremes, but also variable. It was quite a mammoth task. And this is one of my favorite slides because you actually see how it works. And for all of y'all who can read more than scripts, I hope y'all can read at least 2, because I think the effort will be more visible then. This is something that I think I found is the space that I think I'm very interested in, because all of us are agents of communication, and we have the power to make a difference with the choices that we make. And when we work with brands and we sort of advise them to take this multilingual approach, it can be very beneficial to the brand to create stronger connections, wider audience, but also increase the accessibility of communication. And the multilingual approach can also be non-hierarchical. It can be not top-down, English first and the others, but like I showed you just now, they can all work simultaneously. They're not copied from each other, they're not matched to something, but they just share a visual language. And I'll leave you with a paraphrased quote that I started off earlier. A language barrier says we're different. A shared language, well, that just says we're the same. Thank you.